Okay, all yours.
All right. Let's see. Do you all want me to share the agenda on
Yes,
screen?
I would
Sounds like
appreciate,
Jackie says yes, so.
yeah, I would appreciate it. I'm having trouble accessing documents.
Okay. Let me see if I can share.
And then just for Jackie and Stephanie, your purposes to know who's here, we got Sky, Tom, and Jeff Emerson, and myself. So we have 4 of us in the conference room here at Town Hall.
Okay, great.
All right. Okay, call to order. Jackie, do we have to do anything specific for that?
Nope, I'm writing down the time as we speak.
Okay, are there any public comments? Are there any members of the public?
There are not.
Okay. Approval of minutes.
I think you all saw or you and Mark and Nick saw the minutes I corrected based on the comments you made.
Yep.
So I guess I have to make my own motion to accept my own minutes.
Yeah, because the staff can't
Goodness.
vote on this. So.
And I'll second.
Okay.
Unanimous.
Okay, staff update.
I don't think we have anything in particular to update on. So other than we're excited to see all the work that you did. This is a lot of good information, so we're anxious to talk about it. So.
All right. Okay, file sharing. We got a new Google Drive hosted by the town. Thank you, Sky, for setting that up for us. We've obviously started leveraging that. And another old business item was, well, let's see, Jackie, you said you're having a hard time accessing it.
I had got into it before when I used the link, but tonight when I started to do it, I was, for some reason, and it's a problem I'll have to figure out. Google has my old email address, which doesn't work. And I can't seem to change that, so I don't quite know how to do that.
Okay. Maybe I can help you out sometime.
Okay.
Like do a little
I
session.
don't think I added her either, Stephanie.
I shared it
you
with
added
her.
her. Okay, I wasn't sure if you could. Okay, never mind. I'm stepping out of it then.
Yeah, you gave me the ability to add, so I did go ahead and add Jackie. And she did successfully see it once, but it
That
sounds
one
like we need-
time, and right now I can't seem to do it, so.
Okay, Jackie, we'll do some troubleshooting. We can do like a screen share or something at some point.
Okay.
And then invasive species collaboration. I think Mark, you had mentioned that the Conservation Commission was going to be doing an event on, was it November 2nd or something like that? Jackie, did you ever reach out to them?
I have not. I'm sorry, I lost track of that.
Okay.
Kind of like
We talked-
Yeah, they did do invasive species cleanup at head of tide on
Head of
November
Tide.
2nd. Yep. I'm sure they'd be happy to talk about you guys. They'll probably do one again in the spring. Well, maybe not probably. They might do one again in the spring. I don't know. They're working on other things now, but if
Right.
you need contact information for them, I can always provide that.
Okay, thank you. And I will reach out to them before our next meeting and see what their thinking is, because I think that we talked about not so much doing an actual cleanup, but to do an educational piece that we would co-sponsor.
Yep. Okay. All right, new business. So what I was able to do since we met with Mark last time was I reached out to a bunch of folks in my network and tried to compile materials. So I thought I would just give kind of a little overview of the materials that we were able to compile. Has anyone been able to look at any of it so far, or at least kind of get a sense of what we've put together?
I've been looking at that model best ordinance. I thought it was pretty useful.
Okay. I will just kind of do an overview of everything, and frankly, I have not looked at all the materials because there's just a lot there. Okay, here we go. Um, all right, so I think starting with general info, there was a battery storage guidebook um, that I think is a little more general guidance about things to think about. I started a document with other community projects and some links. I think some of these maybe were ones that the Bowdoin interns had also found. But as we find other community projects, we can just add to this list and keep this document as sort of a place for links. And then there's a Word doc here about general comments and notes that I got back from folks. So, things to think about as we, as a town, are considering projects like this. And this stuff looks really interesting. The University of Michigan has a Graham Sustainability Institute Center for Empowering Communities, and they have a whole best guide and also some additional resources. Recommended reaching out to the Island Institute. Maybe they would be a good person to come do an educational session or something like that, or they have a good person. I haven't reached out to this Suzanne McDonald person, but I have the ability to get an intro to her and maybe see if they've done anything with battery storage. I did look at the Island Institute website and it didn't seem like there was anything specific there. The North Carolina Clean Energy Center at the University of North Carolina. They have an ordinance database. I haven't looked around in there to see if there's any battery stuff from other jurisdictions, but that might be something to look through. And then the city of, so this is Canada, but some resources. I mean, my takeaway from some of this stuff is just, hey, do a survey of what other communities are thinking about, questions to think about, and make sure we're covering all of our bases around the project. That's kind of what I was trying to put in the general bucket. I'll come back to the meeting with Kurt Maitland in a minute. And then the ordinance resources are all really example ordinances from other communities or model ordinances from different institutions like NYSERDA. That must be the one, Mark, that you might have been looking at, the NYSERDA model.
The
Well-
California one.
Oh yeah, and the California one. So I haven't looked through most of these, but these should all be pretty concrete. I would say like grab example language. And then some of these resources probably have some context around, hey, like for this section of your ordinance, some you might consider doing this or you might consider doing that. Like this is the optionality that you have at your discretion. So I think this is probably going to be the bulk of where we'll want to be spending our time in terms of the resources. And then safety, I haven't looked at any of these, but I think that these are all, related to mostly fire considerations and things like that. I know so Mark shared the Bowdoin intern report with us, and their stuff seemed to be really focused on the fire safety elements as well. So I think that the bases there are pretty well covered, but just additional resources that might be helpful. And again, sorry, I haven't had a chance to read through all of the specifics.
Oh, that's fine. Oh, we haven't either. So.
And then let me end with the meet. So I met with Kurt Maitland, who is an attorney working at the Energy Law Clinic at Vermont Law and Graduate School, which is where I have my master's degree from. And their energy clinic had focused many years on community solar. But it sounds like they're moving in a direction of being interested in doing battery related stuff. And Kurt Mayland, he is an interesting guy. Apparently, he owns land in Massachusetts and was trying to get a big battery project on it. So he kind of had some firsthand experience as trying to lease his land to a developer. It wasn't Mission Clean Energy, it was some other um, developer. But he kind of got a good firsthand experience of what it's like as a landowner. Um, and he was saying, so there's a whole bunch of information in here. Massachusetts has been really flooded because they implemented a requirement to pair batteries with solar projects. So any solar project over 5 kW, which is actually quite small, has to have batteries. And then they also have an additional kind of economic incentive with these clean peak certificates where batteries can earn additional revenue through that mechanism. So with his specific 2.5 acres of land in Massachusetts, for a 50 megawatt battery, the developer was going to pay him $1 million up front and $100,000 per year in lease payments that would go up 1.5% per year. He also said that, so that project I think fell through, but the land across the road from him is being developed by Mission Clean Energy, and he's been trying to get in touch with them to sell them his land, but they've been very unresponsive. And his suspicion is that they're very speculative right now, and they're just kind of trying to find any property that might be a good fit and kind of get it locked up with an option agreement with the landowner that gives them basically the rights to do something with that land for, let's say, 5 years. And, kind of on the cheap, they're kind of going around and just speculating on where they might do something. But in order to actually get something going, it's pretty expensive to like just doing the interconnection process can cost a lot of money to do the interconnection study to see if it can fit into the grid's capacity. The other thing he said is that the other reason he thinks that Mission Clean Energy is a little more speculative in our area in particular is that the way the wholesale energy markets are right now, there isn't a huge difference between cheap and expensive times. So there isn't that incentive to charge batteries when it's really inexpensive and then export when it's really expensive and make money that way. And so right now, just with Maine and New Hampshire, without those incentives like they have in Massachusetts, it's more maybe of a future thing than a current thing. He also checked if they had applied for interconnection for the Topsham site, and he said that he doesn't see an interconnection application. He said that, so this was interesting. He said that we might want to check our zoning code if you guys haven't already, that there could be a situation where they could be grandfathered in under existing code if they can argue that they fall under the category, like an existing category, like a utility, if there's reference to that in our zoning code already. So we would just want to make sure that we are being clear with them that, hey, we are writing zoning that will apply to your project, put them on notice.
A little bit on that, Stephanie, is
Yeah.
they came to us about a little over a year ago. And at that point, Tom and Sky explained to them that the location they want doesn't do it in our current zoning code.
Okay.
They could do it in the industrial zone, but they can't do it in where the business farm is.
Okay.
So they know zoning has to be changed to accomplish what they want. That's what they asked us to try to work on.
Perfect. That's awesome. so then again, yeah, he was saying that what they've done with Bisson is probably, they are probably paying them something, that, and Bisson has agreed to, give them the option to develop on that land over the next, let's say, 5 years or something like that. And so I told Kurt about the 300 megawatt size that Mission Clean Energy told us. And he was thinking that based on the project he was looking to do on his land, he thinks Bisson would be getting 300K a year plus some big chunk up front. And that he said that the town or community should aim to do as well as the landowner.
We were hoping to do better.
Yeah.
Because they claim the plant's worth 300 million. So if we apply our tax rate to that, would be about 3 million a year.
Yeah. So he said that these sorts of projects are going to try to be as close to substations as possible so that they don't have to run a lot of new transmission lines to get connected in. That we could consider a special permit process that gives us a lot of control over each project, or do some sort of overlay zone near transmission. I know, Mark, you had already mentioned an overlay zone was in conversation amongst you all. We already talked about that. Let's see. And then, yeah, he kind of said the same thing. Like, we always have our property tax rate to fall back on. But what happens is it becomes difficult to actually value and assess the project, because, you know, the assessor might say, well, what's your cost of construction? But the developer will say, well, you know, the materials cost this. You shouldn't include labor in that because that's actually not part of the cost. And the developer is going to be depreciating the value federal tax purposes over, you know, a shorter period of time. And they also will be getting the tax credit from the federal government. So they might argue that that should decrease the project cost. So anyway, Kurt's advice was that wiser towns basically try and come up with an agreement directly with the developer, so that it's known what we're going to get, and the developer's agreeing to pay that, as opposed to fighting over the assessed value. He personally felt like safety concerns are overblown. He said that the projects do often change hands multiple times, and that we should, you know, try to have some right to review when the project's assigned a new owner and make sure that they're financially capable. And then he also offered to come talk to us in person. Come talk to us or come talk to the select board. I think that's definitely something I want us to talk about, of like, hey, if this guy has all of this experience and advice, what what additional insight would we want from him, or questions would we want to ask of him? Do we think it's valuable for him to come present to the select board, or just come present to the planning board? Or what do you guys think about leveraging his offer to come talk?
I think that'd be a great thing. And I think the select board would be interested in it too. We could have a workshop to invite select board, planning board, energy committee. We could, anyone that wants to come listen.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and I think I would be interested to have, like, decide what the agenda would be, or specific topics to let them know, you know, hey, we really want to focus in on the financials, or we really want to focus in on land use, or whatever it is, and they can kind of come prepared to advise on those topics.
My thinking is the financials are definitely useful to have his help on, but I think we put that for a later day. Because Andy Bisson had told me that even before Mission Clean Energy came, someone else came and approached him about, like, you know, signing a deal. And I too wonder whether Mission Clean Energy intends to be in this a long run, and how much of this is speculative. Or so I think the most important thing we can focus on right now is getting the ability for it to happen. You know, the zoning and the licensing stuff. And then when it comes down to a particular company really starts kicking the tires and doing permits, we can focus more on the financial part at that point. But so my thought is we come up with some draft stuff, based on our work or research or maybe help from Kirk or however we come up with it. And then when we're ready to present the drafts to kind of maybe to kick off the public review process, we bring him in. We do it first by presenting it to the select board, planning board, energy committee, whatever. And we have him in to help lay the groundwork so people know what they're looking at and understand it better.
Yep. I
Just my
like that.
thoughts.
Are you guys shooting for a specific town meeting?
Short answer, no. At first I was thinking maybe to do it by May, but looking at how much is gonna be involved, may not be ready for this.
I felt like you knew that, but I wanted to make sure. So, great.
Something else I'd like to throw out and feel free to punch this off later, Stephanie, but looking at page 4 of this model BSS guide, and it talks about how this is just a piece of the puzzle. In my mind, the puzzle probably has at least 3 ordinances we need to change or come up with, and definitely interested in Sky and Tom's input. Certainly the zoning ordinance would need to be made to allow this, and whether it be an overlay district or however we do it. Then it looks like, at least in California, they contemplate the BSS as a separate ordinance from the zoning. And then we need to adopt a fire code, because I think my understanding for Tom and Jeff can pipe in is that Maine has not adopted NFPA 855 yet. So we may or may not want to just do NFPA 55, but right now we need to do something. So I think there's at least 3 pieces that would have to be put into place to make this happen. But so I'd like to introduce that as a topic for discussion. It doesn't have to be right now. It could be whatever you think's best. So
I will also say I only have about 10 more minutes. So if anyone has any very specific Sky questions, now is the time for them. I'll have to leave then.
Yeah, well, we made it through an overview of all of the materials that are in here. So I would just say, do you have access to this stuff, Sky? Yes, you do, because you created it. Does everyone that needs access to this have access to this stuff? Or can we get them access?
at least for staff, we certainly can.
I can always get you access if you want it, Tom. You guys don't have to Google login, which makes it harder.
My thoughts, so the NFPA, the 855 would cover our life safety and firefighting portion of it, I think. You don't have to comment on that now, but we confirm it does. With that regard, that wouldn't have to be built into the ordinance, just.
Well, there's 2 things you have to think of. 855, I think we looked, and I don't think it's adopted by reference, and even if it is, I think with something like this should be better as a standalone adoption law.
Yeah, well, we'd have to adopt it locally. Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Yeah, so we'd have to adopt that locally. And then the ordinance would just come down to where do we want these, or where does the town want these, and what would be the design requirements? So it could simplify a lot in those respects, meaning our own ordinance, we have one for wind and we have one for solar. These were, I determined this was electrical power generation. I'm curious, and we may want to get input on whether or not they could make the argument it's utility, public utility facility. They haven't tried, they reached out at that at first and then backed off when I made my determination. If they wanted to push it, I'd be curious if it had any teeth to it. That aside, we were just in our zoning is where the wind and the solar are currently, and they have whatever we wanted to incorporate into the best model would just end up there. We'd adopt, of course, the NFPA 855. And these would also be subject to a local site plan review, which already incorporates a lot of design standards.
Yes.
So what ends up in the zoning ordinance would be additional to what we already have, meaning the document's going to shrink considerably, I believe.
is there a benefit to having some of the stuff that's in the model ordinance separate
Sure.
from the zoning code? In that, because it talks about annual reports and permits and stuff.
Well, and there again, so whatever we do, I suggest we put the burden of compliance on the applicant, or
Right.
the owner. Staff could be the conduit for reviewing or receiving the documents, or a third-party review. That's another avenue that I take in some of the things I do, and they just submit the final report. So if we're looking for an annual compliance or a biannual, whatever it is, then that report would just be generated and come in and be tucked in your new filing system.
Because what I'm thinking is it's simpler to have, say, the annual license or the license to actually operate the facility. As
Yeah,
opposed to the siting and construction, have that separately and just apply to the town, as opposed to
Sure.
have to get on planning board agendas. and have the
that
planning
that
board-
makes sense if you're gonna do an annual license. I would say that's most similar to the lodging inns victualers section of the code. The other one that's somewhat similar to this, the two, because I was just taking a really quick look beforehand. The other one that if you were gonna think about doing that, that's similar is the adult entertainment. Those are the two chapters outside of zoning that kind of regulate land use issues. Though with the annual licensing, that sounds really similar to the lodging inns victualers one, which is very short and just basically says you need to apply for a liquor license every year, I think. So it would potentially just be similar to that.
It seems like maybe the
And the marijuana
annual,
one, yes,
yeah.
thank you.
the annual license might have some type of report regarding the fire stuff.
Yeah.
Making sure they're following all the
Yep.
things in the past.
Well, that helps
years
keep
they've
it
done.
fluid too, so
Yeah.
if, I'm assuming the board would issue a license
Yep.
based on whatever gets submitted, and they could amend the submittal requirements from time to time,
Mhm.
if needed.
Yeah, I think
That's a good idea.
I think that's probably, yeah, copying the marijuana is a good suggestion as well. I never joined that chapter. And then the historic district is an example of a zoning overlay that has a lot of criteria to it, I guess. As I've been fighting some about recently. So I feel like that's like that, and the solar is an example of something kind of like this that's in zoning, but that's not an overlay. I do like the idea of an overlay because I know that there would be a lot of concern in R3 about this, but if you just do it along the transmission line, makes sense, so.
It sounds like from what Stephanie's found, that's the only place that's economically viable is along the
Mhm.
transmission lines, right, Stephanie?
Yeah, so I think that would go a long way towards like, assuaging any fears people would have that there's gonna be a best thing out out on Ward Road. When we know that's not gonna be the case, but if it's permitted, they might not wanna vote for it due to that, so. I don't think I have a whole lot of comments. I think everything sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, the overlay would narrow it to where they're gonna be anyway. but
Mhm.
Yeah, that should be simple enough.
So I know we're about to lose Sky. As far as, there's a lot here. What's the most helpful for Energy Committee folks to be doing? Like to what degree? I think the way I was envisioning this is that someone, I don't know who, would be kind of combing through all of the example ordinance materials and build out an initial draft. And in that draft, in each section, there would be like, hey, we have some optionality here. Kind of like what the Bowdoin interns did, right? Like every single town is going to kind of do the same things. Some towns did it this way, some towns did it that way, like we have some optionality. So get the structure in place. And then if there's additional research on any particular thing, then maybe the Energy Committee folks, like we could go help dig in on certain things as opposed to doing that initial draft. But I mean, how are you guys thinking about this?
That's fair. I think, how about if we propose this, is that before the next meeting, we all look at the materials you came up with in the various towns and come up with a short list, maybe for each person, 3 things or something that strike you as, I really want to make sure Topsham's ordinance has this.
Hmm.
And then what I would do is take all those and start with one of the draft ordinances or one of the town ordinances, depending on what people seem to like the best. And then come up with a draft for the January meeting that we can then workshed, so.
And then is that the one that we would maybe invite Kurt Mayland to come join in case we want to bounce ideas, or we're thinking that we would have him come in when we're actually past that and ready to engage back with the select board and planning board?
I guess I'd leave that up to you. You know, ideally, maybe we get them both times. But if
Yeah.
we can't have them both, I'd rather save them for the select board, I think.
Well, he might be willing to like zoom in to that
Mm,
more casual session, and then maybe he'll come in person when it's a bigger audience and it's more of a workshop, and it would be easier for him to be in person.
Yeah, if he's willing, that would be great.
He seemed very excited about it and generous with his insight and time. Can't hurt to ask.
But I'm thinking rather than have it just be me pick what I like, it might be nice to get everyone's input before I start doing the first draft and then.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that idea, Mark.
Mm.
Anyone else have an opinion?
No, but on that, and it may be obvious, but just a link to where everything is one spot where it's all located that we're gonna review, so we're all in the same area.
Okay,
Is it, I mean, maybe it's already there.
yeah, I think we can make clear which ones we're looking at.
Yeah,
you're right.
which ones we're looking at.
I think we want a copy of the NFPA too. I'll double check.
And I think that's probably a separate task. I'm thinking right now it's the BSS ordinance, so to speak. I think we'll probably rely on you, because I know there was some talk that I think the 855 has a 10-foot barrier between buildings. And I think maybe Chris, our fire chief, was saying he'd really like to have 20 or something. So maybe we'd have you look at 855, or after reading some of this, it looks like some places in California have 100 feet setback from property lines at least or something. And maybe you could identify things that you think we should do different than 855. So if Topsham came forward and said, we want to do 855, except we want the setback to be 100 or whatever it might be.
Like
And
code amendments.
and then for Sky and Tom, ideally, the piece of this that's encapsulated in the zoning code itself, probably I'm gonna have to lean on you guys, just because I don't write zoning codes. Especially, how to do the overlay district, how to define the use, what we need to have, if you guys could start thinking about that. So my thought is for the next meeting, we just come up with ideas of how we want to do it. And then I would work on this piece after that meeting, based on the input. Two of you could come up with some of the zoning stuff after that meeting. Jeff could come up with the fire stuff. Then we come back in January with the Kirk. He helps us woodshed all of this.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I think if you guys have a specific chapter for it and we've got a lot of other stuff, ours doesn't need to be crazy.
Right. Is there maybe this just be a question, a size cutoff? In here, I think it said a megawatt. This applies after a megawatt. Has anybody thought about that? I don't know. I'm not too familiar with that.
That might be a Kirk question too.
Yeah, okay.
What's
Yeah.
the good size to apply this to?
Yeah. I think in this, doesn't it reference tiers? I think
Right.
some of these materials are going to talk a little bit about different size systems and considerations.
Yeah, and maybe different documents have different applicability standards in them. I'll take a look and.
And I think these in general don't apply if it's behind the meter, right? I think if it's just someone using it on their own facility, it doesn't get regulated by this. It's if it's connected to the grid to go back and forth, then it is regulated by this.
Yeah.
So
By our zoning or by,
I thought I read in some of these, or maybe it's just general stuff I read about this, not by our zoning. Our zoning doesn't get that specific, our zoning doesn't get into it.
Could be NFPA has.
But let's say BIW decided they wanted to have a massive battery that helps run their plant if they lose power for a certain amount of time. Not that BIW is in Topsham, but I think these
Much
would,
to your chagrin.
much to my chagrin. I keep working on CMP code at Topsham. This wouldn't necessarily be considered a battery storage facility. I think they seem like a lot of somewhere I read that it's considered a battery storage if it's assisting the grid as opposed to someone just using it for their own use.
Yeah, primary versus accessory uses, what is it? You can do whatever size solar you want as long as. it's a
Yeah,
house.
that all becomes interesting too, because anybody with one is probably gonna
That should be
sell it
listed
back
out,
to the grid.
that actually should be listed out right in the scope though, of 855.
Mhm.
That's one of the things I'll talk about is what actually defines one of these.
Mhm.
Yeah, the standalone, I think we're talking about a standalone use, aren't we?
Yeah.
Or grid use.
Actually, my sister and her utility in New Hampshire either paid or had her get a battery in her house that it's connected to her system. And it's supposed, the utility sees it as helping them if the power goes out
Sure.
to carry them over for a couple hours or something or other.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
but certainly it's not this big.
Everything changes. Remember the towers, everywhere towers, and now we have antennas where nobody knows where they are.
Yeah.
There's more of them.
Yep.
I feel like we hit a good stopping point for me to be.
Yeah, thanks, Sky.
Yeah, absolutely. Good luck with it, everyone, for the rest of
Okay.
the meeting.
Thanks, guys.
Let's see. Meeting. So we talked about ordinance next steps.
Yep.
Educational sessions. So it sounds like in general, the timeline, like are we kind of deciding that we don't think it's realistic to get this on the warrant for May, the town meeting warrant for May?
I think probably that's the case, yes. Because, which sounds like Scott, the look Sky was giving me, she thinks it's definitely the case. So.
So does that mean that we would have to wait until the following year, or could there be a special?
No, we can have special town meetings.
Okay.
And we have in the past if we need them for something. So we may need a special town meeting for the recode because that may not be ready either. So, and sometimes things come up. So I think it's more important to get it right than to try to rush to get it for May. So
Yeah, I agree. And like with the holidays, like just personally, I'm very excited about all this stuff. I am looking forward to reading it all, but it's a lot of material. It's going to be kind of a bit of a time commitment, and it's also about to be the holidays and stuff when it's lots of family commitments too. So, I personally feel, and just given what we know about the seriousness of Mission Clean Energy, I feel okay not trying to rush it for the May town meeting and giving the public hearings the time that they deserve to be well done as well.
and if you'd rather say not have a December meeting because of the holidays and just change the schedule for what I just talked about and have us all come back in January with our thoughts to work for a draft for February, that's fine too. So.
Okay. That makes sense to me, certainly.
Yeah, I'm good either way. I like having deadlines to get me to do things, so I don't mind keeping the December date. But how does everyone else feel about what Mark proposed for reading the materials on our own, coming back with, hey, these are the top 3 things that I think are important, and then Mark and others, I guess Sky and Tom Jeff can work on drafting kind of a first draft, and then in January, 3rd week of January is when our January meeting would be, and we can have that be more of a get into a draft document and discuss those details and try and get some decisions.
Looks like Tom wanted to say something.
Well, I'm just curious, since it sounds like we're not against the gun, do we want to limit this to Best Systems battery storage or open it up to the ESS, which could include others as they come online? So Best is just a type of ESS.
Yeah, I would say battery.
Stick with that.
Unless you all feel like we want to boil the ocean, or it's worth just putting in the extra time to expand that scope.
And there's also the issue of other types of batteries. Would the ordinances reflect that in any way? I mean, I've just begun to see several different kinds. And so I don't, not being an engineer, um, I'm not sure whether they have other issues. For example, I heard about a lithium sulfide, which has it would be cheaper because sulfur's pretty common, and and probably less danger from fire. So should we be looking beyond just the lithium ion?
I think that's a Kurt question. Because he might have a better idea what the
Yeah.
cutting edge is. And I'll upload
Right.
an article I found in the paper the other day about I think it's a sodium ion facility.
Yep, I've seen that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think what other kinds of energy storage systems would we be looking at? Because I feel like the land use in particular is very different
Mhm.
between them.
Well, according to my search AI, that could be mechanical, thermal, chemical systems.
Pumped storage, like water
I don't know
storage.
what those are. But to the battery, what's a battery? It would all come back to what we define it as.
Mm.
What is the best system? And if, I suppose, you may want to limit that, you may not want to limit that to types of batteries, or that's probably a good starting point, is the definition.
I almost, until we hear from Kurt, I think we want to focus on limiting what we're allowing. We can always add in later other things if we've had a chance to look at them, but whereas we don't know all the unforeseen consequences of all these things, I think we need to make whatever we allow to be something we understand.
Yeah, I think I'd want to look at NFPA document 855 and see what the scope of that is. And probably limit this to that at least, is.
They probably already have it listed.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it seems like step one is just digging in on the materials and seeing all these examples, and I think it'll be a good learning experience for all of us. And the next time we talk, we'll maybe know the answers to some of those questions of what scope do we want to tackle. And okay, is there anything else? I feel weird ending so early, but I'm sure folks wouldn't mind getting home.
I think there's plenty of work here, I guess, without adding extra work.
Yeah. There's a lot. A lot of resources, which is great. It's great that we don't have to do all this on our own and reinvent the wheel here.
Yeah.
Oh, Mark, I was gonna see if I know you gave a printout of the Bowdoin intern report, but it had some links on the last page. Would you be able to share that document so I can go to those links?
Sure, yeah. I'll find my article on the sodium ion and I'll upload that in the actual Word version to the drive. So.
Perfect. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, well, the next meeting is the 16th.
Yep.
So we'll reconvene then, and bring our top things that are important to us as we read through the example ordinance language.
Unless you do want to save that for January and then have some time around Christmas and do other things.
I
think at the very least, I think the Energy Committee should definitely meet even if we just focus in on maybe education sessions unrelated to the best stuff.
Right.
But maybe, yeah, we have the January meeting be like, hey, everyone has a couple months to read through all the documents and make notes and maybe even start drafting stuff.
And that would give me a chance to talk with you about what I've read and don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, if you're kind of offering to help pull all those pieces together a bit, you know, it has to work for your your bandwidth too.
Well, why don't we do that then? Only because I'm just thinking now, the end of the year and the very beginning of January, we're busy getting the budget together too, the first drafts. So let's do that. We'll plan that the January meeting will be the one we all bring in the pieces. Since I haven't heard from Mission Clean Energy since July, so I don't think they're banging at the door saying we're anxious to build this tomorrow. Let's plan the January meeting is when we come back to go through all of the ideas.
Okay.
And then December meeting, as you said, you can plan your educational sessions.
Okay. Any deadlines or events we need to be aware of?
Not in my mind.
Okay. I will move to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second.
All right,
Bye.
thank you. All right.
All right. Thanks.
Mhm.